The sun, climbing toward mid-morning, stretched Galad's shadow and those of his 3 armored companions ahead of them as they trotted their mounts down the road that ran straight through the forest, dense with oak and leatherleaf, pine and sorghum, most showing the red of spring growth. He tried to keep his mind empty. Still, small things kept intruding. The day was silent, save for the thud of their horses' hooves. No bird sang on a branch, no squirrel chittered. Too quiet for the time of year, as though the forest held its breath. This had been a major trade route once, long before Amadicia and Tarabon came into being. Bits of ancient paving stone sometimes studded the hard-packed surface of yellowish clay. A single farm cart far ahead behind a plodding ox was the only sign of human life, now besides themselves. Trade had shifted far north. Farms and villages in the region dwindled, and the fabled lost mines of Elgar remained lost in the tangled mountain ranges that began only a few miles to the south. Dark clouds massing in that direction promised rain by afternoon if their slow advance continued. A red-winged hawk quartered back and forth along the border of the trees, hunting the fringes, as he himself was hunting. But at the heart, not on the fringes. The manor house that the Seanchan had given Eamon Valda came into view, and he drew rein, wishing he had a helmet strap to tighten for excuse. Instead, he had to be content with rebuckling his sword belt, pretending that it had been sitting wrong. There had been no point to wearing armor. If the morning went as he hoped, he would have had to remove breastplate and mail in any case, and, if it went badly, armor would have provided little more protection than his white coat. Formerly a deep country lodge of the King of Amadicia, the building was a huge, blue-roofed structure studded with red-painted balconies. A wooden palace with wooden spires at the corners, atop a stone foundation like a low, steep-sided hill. The outbuildings, stables and barns, workmen's small houses and craftsfolk's workshops, all hugged the ground in the wide clearing that surrounded the main house, but they were nearly as resplendent in their blue and red paint. A handful of men and women moved around them, tiny figures yet at this distance, and children were playing under their elders' eyes. An image of normality where nothing was normal. His companions sat their saddles in their burnished helmets and breastplates, watching him without expression. Their mounts stamped impatiently, the animals' morning freshness not yet worn off by the short ride from the camp. "It's understandable if you're having second thoughts, de Modred," Brom said after a time. "It's a harsh accusation, bitter as gall, but—" "No second thoughts for me," Balad broke in. His intentions had been fixed since yesterday. He was grateful, though. Trom had given him the opening he needed. They had simply appeared as he rode out, falling in with him without a word spoken. There had seemed no place for words then. "But what about you 3? You're taking a risk coming here with me, a risk you have no need to take. However the day runs, there will be marks against you. This is my business, and I give you leave to go about yours." Hugh stiffly said, but he could not find words this morning, or loosen his throat. The stocky man shook his head. "The law is the law, and I might as well make use of my new rank." The 3 golden star-shaped knots of a captain sat beneath the flaring sunburst on the breast of his white cloak. There had been more than a few dead at Jeremel, including no fewer than 3 of the Lord's captain. They had been fighting the Seanchan then, not allied with them. "I've done dark things in service to the light," gaunt-faced Bayar said grimly, his deep-set eyes glittering as though at a personal insult. "Dark as moonless midnight. Likely I will again, but some things are too dark to be allowed." He looked as if he might spit. "That's right," young Bornhald muttered, scrubbing a gauntleted hand across his mouth. Galad always thought of him as young, though the man lacked only a few years on him. Dane's eyes were bloodshot. He had been at the brandy again last night. "If you've done what's wrong, even in service to the light, then you have to do what's right to balance it." Bayar grunted sourly. Likely, that was not the point he had been making. "Very well," Galad said, "but there's no fault to any man who turns back. My business here is mine alone." Still, when he heeled his bay gelding to a canter, he was pleased to have them gallop to catch him, fall in alongside, white cloaks billowing behind. He would have gone on alone, of course, Yet their presence might keep him from being arrested and hanged out of hand. Not that he expected to survive in any case. What had to be done, no matter the price. The horses' hooves clattered loudly on the stone ramp that climbed to the manor house, so every man in the broad central courtyard turned to watch as they rode in. 50 of the children, in gleaming plate and mail and conical helmets, most mounted with cringing, dark-coated Amadition grooms holding animals for the rest. The inner balconies were empty, except for a few servants who appeared to be watching while pretending to sweep. 6 questioners, big men with the scarlet shepherd's crook upright behind the sun flare on their cloaks, stood close around Radam Asunawa like a bodyguard, away from the others. The hand of the light always stood apart from the rest of the children, a choice the rest of the children approved. Gray-haired Asunawa, his sorrowful face making Bayar look fully fleshed, was the only child present not in armor, and his snowy cloak carried just the brilliant red crook, another way of standing apart. But aside from marking who was present, Galad had eyes for only one man in the courtyard. Asunawa might have been involved in some way. That remained unclear, yet only the Lord Captain Commander could call the High Inquisitor to account. Eamon Valda was not a large man, yet his dark, hard face had the look of one who expected obedience as his due. As the very least he was due. Standing with his booted feet apart and his head high, command in every inch of him, he wore the white and gold tabard of the Lord Captain Commander over his gilded breast and backplates, a silk tabard more richly embroidered than any Pedra Nile had worn. His white cloak, the flaring sun large on either breast and thread of gold, was silk as well, and his gold-embroidered white coat,